All right, it is the top of the hour, and I do like to start things on time. Thank you so much, and welcome to our webinar, Building Readers by Implementing Bookshare. Bookshare is committed to equity and literacy, and this event is one way we're demonstrating that by reaching students in underserved districts throughout the country. We're excited to have each of you here today, and thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Vanessa Lombardo, and I am an outreach coordinator for Bookshare, and I will be moderating our event today. Before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping items. Captions are being provided for today's webinar through Zoom. In order to access the captions, please select the Captions button from the Zoom menu at the bottom of your screen and choose Display Captions. You will also have access to the full transcript via stream text at the link, which will be put in the chat box. This session is being recorded, and the video recording and transcript will be made available to attendees in just a few days. This event is being hosted in Zoom webinar format, so only the presenter's audio will be activated. The Q&A feature is enabled, and we encourage you to ask questions anytime throughout the presentation. To access the Q&A feature, please click on the Zoom menu at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we can. Additionally, at the end of the presentation, we will be offering options for additional support in the future. We will be offering a certificate of attendance, which can be obtained after you complete our brief 5-question survey at the end of the session. And finally, later, we will be hearing from our guest speaker, Emily Cooper. Emily has a background as a speech and language pathologist and is currently an assistive technology specialist who works for the San Diego Unified School District. Welcome all. To begin our discussion, we would like to start out with a short poll. You'll see a poll come up on your screen, and the question is, how familiar are you with Bookshare? The options are, I have never used Bookshare before, I'm new, I'm somewhat familiar, or I am familiar. Simply click the option that applies to you and click submit. We'll give it a minute for all the responses to come in. While we're waiting on the poll responses, I'd like to share some Bookshare information. We serve over 800,000 students with difficulty accessing standard print in all 50 states, as well as in several countries around the world. Over 45,000 schools have a Bookshare organizational membership already, and 9.5 million educational ebooks have been downloaded by our students. The poll is now closed. Thank you so much for participating. Let's see our results. All right, so we have a lot of very new, never used people to Bookshare, as well as, of course, somewhat familiar and familiar. That's great. We appreciate having quite the mix that we do today. So with that, let's move on to our learning objectives. So our goal today is to explain what Bookshare is, which students qualify for Bookshare membership, and we're also going to hear from Emily about how she implemented Bookshare in her own district. After that, you will see a brief demo of using Bookshare from the student's perspective to see how easy it is to get your students reading and to help them meet their educational goals, whether they are physically in school or some other type of hybrid setting. We wanted to show a short 1-minute video to briefly exchange Bookshare. Let's take a listen.
Inside every book is a new world, and nothing should keep you from exploring. Whether you're learning to read, studying for an exam, or just having fun, Bookshare helps you read in ways that work for you. Choose your favorite high-quality voice and listen to your books. Stay focused with karaoke-style text highlights. Adjust text to your perfect size, speed, color, and contrast. Choose from over 1 million titles, ready to read on nearly any device. And the best part? It's free for U.S. students who qualify, and less than $1 a week for qualified adults. So start reading in ways that work for you and explore new worlds with Bookshare.
All right, so let's delve a little bit deeper. So what is Bookshare? So it is a free ebook library, and as the video described, it lets students read in ways that work for them. There are currently over 1 million titles in the collection, and that includes textbooks, as well as books for pleasure reading in a variety of formats. So to be clear, students have to qualify to use Bookshare because we're under the copyright law. And they are in 3 different categories: a student who is blind or has a visual impairment, a student who has a reading disability or a physical disability that impacts the way they interact with standard print. So a student has to qualify in one of those 3 categories in order to qualify for Bookshare. And again, thank you everyone for joining us for our webinar today, Building Readers by Implementing Bookshare. I would like to introduce Emily Cooper. Emily has a background as a speech and language pathologist and is currently an assistive technology specialist who works at the San Diego Unified School District, in which 61% of students qualify for free and reduced lunch, and over 60 languages are spoken. Emily has implemented Bookshare throughout schools in her district of 120 students and will share some of her insights with us today. Emily, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here, Vanessa. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So first, can you tell us some things about your district as a whole, and what are some of the demographics that are important for us to know?
Sure. I work for San Diego Unified School District, and it is we're a very large district. We serve 121,000 students in preschool through grade 12, and we have 226 educational settings. So really large. 26% of our students are English language learners, and we have about 15,000 students that receive special education services.
Great. And tell us then a little bit about the work that you do at San Diego Unified School District.
Sure. So I'm a speech language pathologist and an assistive technology specialist. I've been with the school district in this department for 16 years, but I practice as a speech language pathologist in various private and public settings for 8 years prior to that. So I've been around a while. I got into assistive technology. My mom is actually a speech language pathologist and assistive technology specialist. So I sort of grew up in the business and saw what she did and was really inspired by it. I work on a small team. So we have an assistive technology team here in San Diego Unified, made up of 4 speech language pathologists, 1 OT and 1 SLPA. And we support lots and lots of different schools. So I serve around 40 different schools. But some of my coworkers who specialize in just augmentative and alternative communication or reading and writing might serve up to 60 or 70. But I serve students with complex communication needs and also students who require supports for reading and writing.
Absolutely. And in terms of, how you kind of got started with Bookshare, how did you learn about it when you were first introduced to it?
So Bookshare was in place when I joined the assistive technology department. Bookshare was in place already. And I immediately saw that it was an excellent way for students to be able to access grade level texts. It was a lot more complex to sign up for it back then. The system's become a lot more streamlined. But you immediately see that it's an amazing way to level the playing field for lots of students. So when I work with kids, I'll often ask them like, what's your favorite thing to do at school? And they'll say lunch. And I'll be like, okay, so what's hard for you? And they'll say, like, oh, usually next is recess. But then I'll say, okay, so what's your least favorite thing to do? And they'll say, oh, I hate reading or I hate writing. But the fact is that they don't necessarily hate it. It's hard for them. So I think incorporating Bookshare and making things accessible for them. If we think about things that are hard for us to do, so I'm terrible at parallel parking. And if you told me I had to do that for 2 or 3 hours a day, I'd be like, what are my other options? And it would not be easy for me. So it's the same for our kids. We're saying, do this thing that's hard for you for hours a day. So incorporating supports like Bookshare to make it easy and for them to get that love of reading is really amazing and inspirational. So Bookshare is one of the supports that we use here in our assistive technology department to make curriculum accessible for our kids.
Absolutely. And I like that you mentioned that in terms of, for us, right, what makes it challenging for us, and thinking about that for our students, and really keeping that at the forefront. So
I think that's important, because we're just like, well, you have to do more of it. If you're going to learn to read, you're going to do lots of it. Well, it's already hard for them. And they've already, maybe if it's been years, they've got it in their heads that I don't like this. So we have to kind of, you know what I mean? Make it accessible and say, oh, let's rethink it. Do you really not like it? Once we take away the barriers that are preventing you from accessing it.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little more about some of the students, that you support, and how have they benefited by using Bookshare?
Sure. So I've been at this a long time. So, back in the day, when it was way back in the day, when we had to literally sign kids up for Bookshare, there was a fax machine was involved. It was a lot more complicated back then. But it used to be a much more complicated process, where we would have to come out, do a consultation with a student, identify that, yes, they do in fact require certain assistive technology supports, like a text reader, like word prediction software, something like that. So for example, I have a student that I worked with years ago, Albert, and he was at a school that served a lot of underprivileged kids or underserved kids at his school. And I went to go bring an iPad. Back in those days, we would provide the hardware as well as some of the supports the students needed. So we had to bring an iPad loaded with supports like a digital text reader, word prediction software, things like this. And this particular student was in 8th grade, but was reading at probably the 2nd grade level. Comprehension was fine, but it was very difficult for him to access grade level text and to produce written work. So we would have to bring out an iPad, load it with all these supports, determine what books he was reading in each of his classes, load those books. But I'll never forget the day that I delivered this iPad to him, and he was kind of in the back of the classroom with a buddy, and I brought an iPad as I was going to train him. And his friend looks at him and says, like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. You just get an iPad. And he was like, well, it'd be a lot cooler if I knew how to read, but yeah, okay. So incorporating, he kind of got where he was and understood that he needed these supports. And he was a really hardworking kid that would use speech recognition software, have it transcribed on the iPad, then recopy it on paper. So because he wanted to do, produce work just like all his peers were doing. So, it was more of a labor intensive process to make curriculum accessible to kids back then. However, now it's ubiquitous. The kids, we have, computers and technologies everywhere, and all the kids are using it. So you're not the kid in the back of the room with the iPad when everybody else is writing on paper. We're, like I said, we're kind of leveling the playing field, that we all have access to lots of these supports, and we can pull in different assistive technology supports, like a digital text reader, like Bookshare, as needed, based on individual need.
Right. And it really being one tool within that toolkit for, UDL, and really making it, as you said, an inclusive, environment. And having, again, access to that, as well as whatever other supports, the student might require as well, in terms of reading, and all, the literacy skills, in terms of, still teaching those, having Bookshare as a support, and kind of blending some of those tools to make the supports as accessible to the students as it can be.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So let's talk and shift a little bit into implementation. So first, what devices do your students use now for Bookshare at school?
So we use both. We're a Google for Education district, so we use Chromebooks. We also, in my department, we utilize iPads for students with complex communication needs, but we typically, we've adopted Google Education for all. Our district's pretty cutting edge. We started an I-21 initiative years ago, where we started one-to-one computing back in like 2009. So before we had the I-21 initiative, when students qualified for assistive technology, our department was often responsible for providing the hardware in addition to the AT supports. Whereas now, with one-to-one computing, and this is happening all over the country, that students have access to technology, to the actual hardware, it's gotten much easier to incorporate some of these supports. In addition to that, our district has a district-wide license. So we got a district-wide license to read and write for Google Chrome, which is an extension that includes a number of assistive technology features, like a text reader, like word prediction software, like speech recognition software, and it's available for all. So staff and students see it as part of their district issued Google image. So it just shows up as an extension on student and staff computers when they're logged into the educational portal. And so in pushing that out, we've naturally been able to incorporate Bookshare as well, because we've been doing kind of large scale trainings to these supports. And then as part of that, we say, you know, we kind of bring in, like, for students that qualify for this additional service, Bookshare, they can utilize the text reader feature in conjunction with that text reader. So it's kind of worked hand in hand, pushing out, you know, we have this AT features to read the books, and now we have Bookshare to provide the actual digital text to our students. So it's been great.
Absolutely. And as you said, a district being so large, being able to push it out to everyone and having it available, you know, certainly seems like that is a strategy in terms of implementing it. Because as we know, we can have all the tools in the world, but if they're not set up to be available to the students and or the teachers, then of course they're not going to get used. So that is it seems to me, a really key point of the strategy for the district, just being so large.
Yes, and you get more buy-in. Like back in the day, I would go to school sites and say, oh, give me 10 minutes at your staff meeting. And the second that I said these tools were only available to students with IEPs, I would lose half my audience. Like one time I had a teacher, it was early in the morning, but she was like nodding off, like as I was speaking, because this doesn't apply to me. It's only available to kids with IEPs. I only have a couple of those, or maybe none. So having those supports available to everyone, we get a lot more buy-in from across the board. So that's been huge.
Absolutely. And talk a little bit about the reading lists that you might have utilized within the school district. Again, just to give access as much as possible, you know, to various books around the district.
Sure. So some of the difficulty in incorporating assistive technology, like I said, is making it available for everyone and making it easy for everyone to access. So what we're looking to avoid is for teachers to see it, teachers or education specialists, to see this as more work. So we've worked really hard on our end to make it as streamlined a process as possible for the teachers. I have a story about a teacher. I was at one of my middle schools, and I passed her like in the mailroom, and she ducked. But I could see her because the mailboxes you can see through. And I said, Michelle, are you hiding from me? I can see you. And she popped up and said, Emily, every time I see you, I think of more work. I got 5 more kids. I need to sign up for Bookshare. I got to send in these referrals for you to get the AT supports. So that's back before we had things more incorporated. But these teachers have a lot on them. And certainly, you know, in the last year and a half, 2 years, it's been a remarkable amount of work for them. So we have worked really hard to try to streamline the process. Signing up for Bookshare has gotten so much easier. It's a much easier process. You can sign up sponsors, and then we encourage them, like you as a professional can sign up additional coworkers as sponsors, and then you have the ability to sign up your own students. As you don't need to come to me. There's nothing special about me. I'll make you a sponsor, and you as a professional can determine if this student requires this and is eligible for it. But as you mentioned, the reading lists. So instead of individually signing up a student and saying, okay, what books does this student need? That could be in a labor-intensive process. Some of my coworkers curated some extensive lists. So 70 or 80 books that are frequently read in high school. So 9th grade year, we can assign this reading list to the student. Now the student has books, we have The Outsiders, that's middle school, but we have a variety of books that are typically read in high school already available with a one click of a button for our teachers, as opposed to saying, okay, what? So we kind of get it started that way to make it easy. So sign the student up. We've made that really easy. We've kind of made we have a naming convention. So the student ID, what their DWA password, we've set up a way to make it across the board easier for teachers to sign them up. And then they subscribe to the book list, and within, 5 minutes, they can have 10 kids up and running with access to digital books. So that's been really positive for us. And yeah, so utilizing those reading lists is really helpful.
Absolutely. And it seems like that structure, right? Kind of having the structure in place, as you said, to kind of bring everything to the forefront. And we talked a little bit about this, certainly, as we've been talking now, but one of the questions that we did get was around, talk about how you get your fellow teachers on board or student buy-in, right? So talk a little bit about some of your strategies around both of those areas, buy-in from the teachers as well as buy-in, from the students.
So I think it's helped that these features are available to everyone now. Like I said, I don't have the gen ed teachers necessarily nodding off when I'm talking to them. We're more interested if we have direct access to it. But I think that we're pushing to teachers, listen, if we can build in some, going along the principles of universal design for learning, that we build in some of these structures at the ground level and make your materials accessible for all of your students, it's going to make you're going to have to do less individualized work down the line. So if you already have you're subscribed to these reading lists, or you have you're aware of other assistive technology tools, as you get new students each year, you can just quickly plug them in to the supports or to the reading list that you've already subscribed to. So the idea is to reduce the amount of work that our teachers have, not have them hiding from us in the mailroom. You know what I mean? And we're looking for the opposite. We want the purpose of incorporating this is to make your curriculum accessible to all of your students easily. So you don't have to provide extra modifications to the materials that you're presenting. You can use your existing materials and then plug in the supports as needed. And the students plug in the supports themselves. So that's the other thing, is that, so getting buy-in from the kids, they are using this already. A lot of these assistive technology supports, they're finding them because they're available. Text readers are readily available. They're built into iOS, or they're built into Chrome. There's word prediction supports that are built into each of those, or speech recognition software. So a lot of it is the kids are already, it's already available to them. I had a student that we do assessments to determine, sometimes we get called in to do a formal assessment, but lately I have more and more trouble. I want to identify, like, look, this is why this student's struggling. So, write something for me. And then I'll have a student use their speech recognition software, and I'll be like, stop using the assistive technology so I can show that you actually need the assistive technology. It's built in already, and the kids are already using it. So, but with regard to your question about getting buy-in from the kids, I think, like I mentioned before, that for the kids that say that they hate reading, I might be like, okay, well, what's something that you really like? The other day I worked with a student. He came in talking about trapdoor spiders, but he also told me he hates reading. We looked up an article about trapdoor spiders, and he was stopping it, asking me, do we live in the Southwest of the US? Do you think I could catch it in a bucket? He was like hooked. Or I'll start a novel for an older student who's playing it super cool with me. And then I say, all right, I got to go. And they'll be like, can I hang back and finish this chapter? So I try to introduce materials that are motivating to the student to get their buy-in. But I think that kind of helps. So I'm not just saying, look, read this novel that's assigned. Like, what are you into? Let's start playing it. And then they can start realizing that, oh, wow, without the decoding barrier in place, or without my comprehension barrier, like, I'm interested in this content, and this is fun. So I work really hard to get the kids invested in it, and it makes it easy. It's pretty easy once, you know what I mean? Kids.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. I love that he was stopping and asking you all these questions. The student with the trapdoor spider.
And he was a kid that you wouldn't
really engaged.
Yes. Oh, it was super. And he had ADHD. Like, it was hard to keep him in line. And then so as soon as we looked it up, he's like, wait, stop. Are you telling me we live in the Southwest of the US? Because so that's engagement. So I knew I had him, So once you get that level of engagement, it's a thrill.
Sure. No, that's wonderful. So thinking about, of the poll in the very beginning, and we asked, are you newer to Bookshare? Are you more familiar? And we definitely have quite a few people who are newer to Bookshare, have maybe never used Bookshare before, maybe had never heard of it. Obviously, now we've explained it a little bit, but what would be your advice maybe to someone, a newer teacher, for, starting out with Bookshare? What would you, say to them in terms of, kind of what your advice might be?
I guess starting is to pick for the kids that are resistant to it, find some way to engage them. So that's the student level, and make sure, we also have to check in with kids. We have some kids that might feel, they feel like they might be different because they're using the text reader. So make sure we're aware of what the own kids' learning preferences are, or certain, biases that they might have. I also try, sometimes I'll get from teachers, that I'll show them Bookshare or show them a digital text reader, and they'll say, oh, I don't, oh, that's synthesized speech. I don't like that robotic voice. And I'll say, you know what, to a student that can't access these texts, you can read. So this text reader is not helpful for you, but think about a student that struggles to access, and suddenly this world is open. So I try to encourage teachers not to bring in their own biases as well, and make sure that they're right, seeing it from the student's perspective.
No,
did I answer your question enough? Did you?
Yes, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, just advice to a newer teacher, someone newer, to using Bookshare.
Getting their buy-in and setting up those reading lists, I think, is really important. So subscribing and Bookshare has lots of them. There's like a Newbery Award winner. There's tons of them in there. So you can subscribe to certain book lists, or you can curate your own very easily. And Bookshare on your website, you have some beautiful tutorials, video tutorials. So I would encourage that for ease of getting kids set up.
Absolutely. There was a question, and we did touch on this a little bit, and we've talked about this previously, talking about, and the person put this in quotation marks, how do you sell, in quotation marks, advantages to digital text, right? That parents, teachers, maybe students too, right? They maybe want a human reader, or maybe not read at all, right? So talk a little bit, we did touch on that a little bit, but expand on that a little bit, just in your experience working with families and students.
Sure. So I get that question a lot from parents. So we'll be in an IEP meeting and they'll say, well, I don't want to incorporate a text reader for my child because then he won't learn how to read. So one of my selling points is, well, first of all, this is separate from remediation. We can continue to build skills. We can continue with the remediation. It's kind of a two-pronged effort. Let's focus on remediating the skills, and then also make the grade level text accessible to your child or to your student. So I think that is a really important factor. There's also the point that using, a lot of teachers will say, oh, I like Learning Ally, or something that's not necessarily, doesn't show the text. Something I love about Bookshare is that, because that's the real life reader. What I love about Bookshare is that, and you alluded, this was kind of addressed in one of your videos, but it highlights some of the text readers will highlight the whole sentence and then each individual word as it's read. So the students are hearing it, they're seeing it. So you're building skills as we're using this as a kind of compensatory strategy. We're also building skills. So that would be my response to it, is that, yeah, sure, we can continue with remediation. However, and there's also the idea of visual fatigue, like particularly when the kids were out of school for COVID. I would encourage them to, like, okay, first let's make sure that we get your visual digital environment comfortable. Let's get your font right. Do you like the inverted? Some of my kids like the black on white as opposed to the white on black, the contrast. So let's get your visual setting set up comfortably. But also sometimes if you don't want to look at it, give your little eyes a rest, and we can close our eyes and listen to it read to us. So there's lots of, universal design for learning is multiple means of expression and multiple means of representation of the curriculum.
Right. And it is so important to meet students where they're at, right? As you're saying, and some days is better maybe for this, some days this approach is better, and knowing that we're all, teachers are working hard, students are working hard, everyone is really, certainly giving it their best effort, but just giving some space for that. and making sure that we're, again, as we had said before, incorporating all these things. Because we're listening to the text doesn't mean, as you just said, that we're not going to do the other skills. It's kind of all of these things, certainly working together as much as possible.
Right. And I don't get that pushback a lot. Like a lot of times parents are like, oh my gosh, I'm pulling teeth to get my kid to read. So this is gonna, I typically you're the hero. You know what I mean? It's the smaller. Yeah, I get to come and be like, wait, look at these things we're gonna do I always hook the kids, say, who has a hard time reading and writing, and they'll raise their hands, and I'll be like, who wants to see something magic that's gonna make it easier for them? But the parents see it that way too. This is an extra support to they don't have to, they're not pulling teeth to get their kid to sit down and read a book or produce some written language.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Emily. I know there have been a couple of questions that have come up in the Q&A box, so thank you for that. A couple of questions in the chat. So I would just encourage anyone, we do have a minute or two to ask some questions on here. I'm just going through the chat too. So one of the questions that is in the chat, and Emily, you talked a little bit about this, but so the teachers, once the teachers are signed up, they can obviously assign, the books to the students. And then depending obviously on what the student needs to read, they can obviously access some of those books. But I guess, have you worked, or has there been any difficulty in terms of, the teachers, and I guess maybe trainings that you might have done in terms of the teachers, assigning the books to the students, or again, ways to make that a little bit easier? Any thoughts on that?
So we've shifted. So we used to work kind of under this expert model where we would sign the teachers up, we would assign the books. So pushing that out and working to build capacity at the site level. That's something we really tried to do. So like I said at the beginning, like, no, there's nothing special about me as a grand sponsor. Like, we can all be sponsors, the people that are qualified to be sponsors, the ed specialists and the occupational therapists, and then they can make their coworkers sponsors. And basically they, as professionals, are certifying that this student does in fact qualify for this service. But we've kind of pushed that out to the site level, train the sponsors, train the staff, build capacity, and then have them use this. Because for all of our students, we need to consider, as part of the IEP process, for all of our students with special education, as part of the IEP process, in special factors, it says, does the student require assistive technology to meet IEP goals and objectives? So ideally, our teachers and staff are trained to say, oh yes, actually, he's reading at this grade level, 2 levels below grade level. So you know what he'll need? A digital text reader. You know what he'll need is Bookshare. I as a sponsor can assign him these books. So as we're building that capacity at sites, now we're reaching so many more kids. If you're waiting for the expert to come out and do it, it's going to take forever, and you're going to get 200 kids signed up as opposed to the thousands of kids that we have signed up in our district. So I would say pushing that out and encouraging staff to say, look, you're considering this at each of one of your IEPs, incorporate this support based on the existing goals and objectives and as part of that IEP process.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Emily. I really, really appreciate your time. And thank you for sharing all of these, good nuggets of information with us, and with this group. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for this awesome support. We use it like crazy, and we appreciate this team very, very much. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Great. All right. So let's move on to a brief demonstration of the Bookshare website from the student's perspective. So to begin, Bookshare offers 2 account types. Educators sign up for an organizational account. These accounts can be created at the school level or at the district level. And on an educational account, the educator would add their qualified students to the account, and the student then logs in and accesses the book on a device of their choice. So let's go out to the browser. All right, so the website is bookshare.org. Again, anyone can have access to the website, bookshare.org. but you do need to be logged in to access and to download books. But like I said, anyone is welcome to go to the website and take a look. As Emily had mentioned, there's quite a few resources available there. So we are currently logged in as our student, Read Daily, and yes, pun completely intended. We do like to have a little fun around here. So we're logged in, and when the student logs in, they are on their My Bookshare page. And of course, they have access to quite a number of things. But one the most important things are they have access to a list of all of their recent books. So these are books that they have accessed recently, and they can pick up from where they left off and look at everything that they have. If they can't remember, they can come out and go back to their books. So these are all most recently accessed books. They also have access to any books that have been assigned to them. So as we had talked about before, and Emily had mentioned, an educator can go in and assign specific books for them to read. And so that would be this list of all the books that were assigned. And then lastly, the reading list, as Emily had mentioned. So either, again, a book list can be, or a reading list can be created for the school, for the classroom, for the district, or again, there are hundreds of lists already available in all different kinds of genres. So once the student is set up with one of the book lists, then they are able to access those books. The easiest way to access a book on a Chromebook through Google Chrome, which is what we're logged in right now, is through our web reader. And the student would access that by clicking on this Read Now button, and it will open up the book. And I have opened it up just to be sure with Zoom that it would work. And so when you actually do it, it'll show you that it's unzipping the book, and it could take a minute or two. But here I have it open already. And we are currently in our Bookshare web reader. Again, this is a free tool to access on a Chromebook, actually on really any device that has access to the internet, a smartphone, a tablet, an Apple, or a Windows PC device. So within the web reader, and actually a newer version of this is coming out. We're very, very excited for the newer features that'll be available. Some people did ask about that in their registration, but our current web reader, as you're looking at it right now, has a few features that I wanted to highlight. So first is our table of contents, where they can navigate around the book, they can go to a specific page and get to where they need to be. They can navigate to the next previous pages, next chapters, and the book can also be read to them, as Emily had alluded to. Let's just take a quick listen.
Forest. Those are weeds, Neftali, said Rodolfo. Not flowers. Now, come. If you make me late for school again, I will tell father. And today I do not feel like running.
So as Emily had mentioned, obviously the student can read it without the audio. They, of course, can watch the recording or the audio going through as it's highlighting the text. Just depends on what the student, of course, needs at that time. There are a few settings that can be changed within the web reader. You can change the font size, the text in the background color, the highlighting color. You can change the speech rate to make it slower or faster. And again, on your device, there'll be different voices that are accessible to you, and you can change that up depending on what's best for the student. You can also quickly shift into a nighttime mode. Again, as mentioned before from Emily, some students just visually benefit from having a darker background and lighter text, so you can quickly pop in and out of that if that's helpful for the student. And there is also a full screen view if having the tabs is distracting to the student. So that's a little bit about the Read Now feature on the web reader. And one other thing, just briefly, is that there is a way to access and search for books. So one series that, of course, is still very popular is the Crossover series by Kwame Alexander. So a student can type that in, type in the title, author, ISBN number, and look for the book. And again, same thing, you do not need to be logged in to search. You can, again, peruse what's in within the collection without being logged in as well. But when you do click on the book, it will give you a brief synopsis, give you a little more information about the book to make sure that that is actually the book that you are looking for. So this is a little bit about Bookshare from the student's perspective. And again, just giving you a little bit of detail in terms of, you know, the way that they look at it when they are accessing Bookshare. All right. So now let's talk about some next steps. So first of all, if you are not sure if your school or district does have a Bookshare account, we do have an email address specifically for that. It is findmyschool@bookshare.org. And if you email into that, someone from our customer service team can help you with any questions related to your account. Set up an account if need be, help you add students or books. And we also, as again mentioned, do have a very robust learning center on bookshare.org, which has many videos and how-to guides for helping you to support your students. So I encourage you to take a look there. So we are coming to the end of our time together. We hope that you have found the information that we have shared helpful. Just to revisit some of our learning objectives from the beginning, we talked obviously about what Bookshare is, qualifies. We heard from Emily in regard to some tips for implementing Bookshare in your district, and of course looked briefly at Bookshare in terms of how it looks from the student's perspective when on Chrome. One quick other reminder, please, if you don't mind, when you exit the Zoom meeting, you will be prompted to complete our brief 5-question survey. We really do greatly appreciate your feedback on what you found helpful, as well as ways for us to improve. And if you would like a certificate of attendance, you will be prompted to fill out a Google form once you've completed the survey, and the survey will be emailed to you. All right, finally, you will see one last poll coming up on your screen, and that is about how we can help you in the future. We look at today as kind of an intro and of course a first step, and there will be a couple of options that you will be able to choose. So let's launch the poll. And you can select more than one of these options. It says multiple choice up there. So for example, maybe you're in charge of your district's account. You're not quite sure how to get individual teachers or students signed up. You can drop into our office hours, and that is just a block of time that will be on November 9th. And that information will come out in some post-event emails to you with the recording. And so that's an opportunity for you to come with questions, and one of our Bookshare staff will be available to work with you right then and there. So certainly that is an option. You can contact customer service at the information directly on the screen, either via phone or email at membership@bookshare.org. And they are available Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time, so 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and expanding those hours to really make sure that we're being as accessible as possible. If you would like an appointment for one-on-one help, we would be, again, happy to do that. We'll schedule a time that works for you, and obviously for a member of our team to sit down with you and work on, specific questions or concerns that you have. And then also, if you would like a teacher training or a district level training, of course, we're happy to do that as well. And again, you can invite teachers that are currently using Bookshare, potentially not using it quite yet, but want an introduction to it. And so we can certainly do that. And of course, if you're not sure, by all means, select that. So please make your selection. And again, we do appreciate the follow-up as well. Excellent. I do just want to take a quick look just to see if there are any last minute questions. We do have a moment or two to see if there are any last minute questions on here. And thank you, Jean, for the poll results. So great. So we will all take a look at those. Some of the questions around the new web reader, again, the interface will look different. We have gotten a lot of feedback from the user community, which has been really, really nice, looking at ways, again, to improve it and improve, of course, the experience. So some of those new features are mostly around just, again, feedback that we've received, the reading, going back and reading, the user interface will look different. So I know the engineering team has really been very, very hard at work, and we're very excited for it. That's anticipated January of 2022. And so as a beta, and then, you know, rolling out hopefully in the spring. So we're excited about that. And then one last question, which is I think very important. It's not only available to students with an IEP, certainly it is available to those students, but because we're under the copyright law, it's available to any students who have difficulty accessing standard print. And that is based on the educator, the teacher, someone from the child study team, you know, making that determination. And so it is not only for students on IEPs or 504s, but certainly it is available to those students, but it is not only for those students. So thank you for that question. I wanted to make that clarification. Wonderful. We are at time. Thank you so much, everyone. We very much appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your day.